Welcome to Comics, Games, and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games, and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
So I'm like, what comic books are you reading?
Indie comic books, Kelly. We're reading indie comic books. And most of them now you get through crowdfunding sites because you can't get them through Diamond or Lunar or your local comic shop. Although we're trying. We're definitely trying to get them in there. And I'm one of the many places that is helping make that happen. We have people who are doing a much better job of it than I am because I'm a Diamond chip. But, you know, we have people like Liberty Entertainment Group who are doing a much better job. Definitely reach out to Barry and Grant if you want to get your indie book into stores. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, Proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and apparently Grizzly Adams' replacement in the new series as the post-COVID, I don't give a crap anymore beard is starting to really fill out. So with that, let's raise a toast to our guest tonight. Max has got Neonseed Bell. And Max, I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name. I don't know if it's Said or Saeed.
Yeah, you can go with Said. We'll stick with we'll go with Said. But RJ, right. Thank you for having me. And if we're doing a toast, I'll do a little one with you.
Here we go. Oh, that first Budweiser of the day feels good.
Yeah, that's nice. But yeah, no, I've been lucky to have a couple people have me on their shows, and Neff from Global Frequency said I should shoot you guys a message, the Critical Blast account, and I was very, very grateful that you could have us in with a couple of hours left in our campaign. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way and say that up front because I really appreciate it.
Well, you're definitely slumming it coming from Global Frequency to our business now, because you had some really great hosts there with a good audience.
I was gonna say, if you didn't tell me, I never would have known. So,
see, that's we're down here in the gutters. This is the show that people don't watch. We have 7 people not watching it right now. Apparently 8. So everybody keep not watching us, I guess. We have Eric Kent out here saying hi to us all. Yes, you're right, Robert. The 6th bud of the day is even better. And Alternate Access is also another alternative, and Starcross Comics for distributing. Although I think Starcrossed, I don't know if they distribute anything that's not published by Starcrossed or bears the Starcross banner. But there are avenues opening up. Competition is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking of competition, what in the world made you decide to compete with all the other publishers out there by getting into the comics industry, Max?
Well, first of all, there was a pandemic and there was not a lot going on. Yeah. So the biggest factor I think was paranoia followed by boredom. Like I've been pretty upfront in saying we're complete amateurs. We know nothing about the indie comics scene, and we admit it. Myself, my members of my team that are working on the book. But the biggest thing was we had an idea and we had time, and we started putting things together, and we are kind of at a point where the final gears are starting to turn, so we realized we had to show it off to people and poke around, and it's been interesting, like, to say the least. Like, I've been on Global Frequency. I did Ginge and Pedro, and I have been introduced to this wide world of the online scene, the digital scene of crowdfunding, of trying to interconnect that with distribution. It's a whirlwind, you know,
Yeah.
but the times are changing, and we're rolling with it. So this is part of that.
I love it that you guys are complete neophytes to all of this because, first of all, you don't have any bad habits to unlearn. And second of all, you don't know what you can't do.
Yeah.
So you do it.
Yeah, well, and it's a very ambitious project. Each one of us is kind of has some experience as an artist in our own right in some field, and like you're saying, it really is a group of people who want to take a risk together. And I mean, um, it's it's opened up, it's put some obstructions in places where we didn't know they were, and it's definitely opened doors and windows where I think other people would be afraid to go through them. Um, but I think we're under 40 hours now left in the campaign, and it's you know, we said if it made $100, we would be really happy, and we did that. So it's something else though. I mean, like I'm learning more and more every day about especially having talked to like Neff and people. This is a huge space, a lot bigger than I anticipated. There's a lot more the narrative I think like far out in the social stream that comics are dead or they're just a way to feed movies or something is completely false from
Yeah,
my
that's
observation.
just true about the big corporate guys.
Well,
There's plenty of
yeah. I mean, that might be an attitude of like traditional publishing and the corporate people, but there's insane stories being told in this space, and we feel comfortable with that. Like we wanted to tell a crazy story that we didn't think anybody would want to buy. Um, and like you poke around a little bit in indie comics, and even some of the bigger stuff you see, um, it's got like dwarves fighting lions. It's got
it's
like
it's
there's
crazy
stuff.
stuff.
It's crazy stuff, and people are accepting of that, and we really wanted to do this thing that was partially an homage to the 80s and 90s kind of violent anime, aggressive anime and manga that was coming out of Japan, but was also like you know has a little bit of piece of each of us in it. um and as the writer, I'd be happy to kind of talk about the process with you of putting together a script for something, having never really written um a comic before, and you know, working with an illustrator and stuff. But the main thing is the story. We really wanted to capture that feeling of like you're a kid, you're flipping through pulp magazines or you're flipping through shows late night and you catch a movie you feel like maybe you're a little too young to watch, and the imagery is maybe a little unsettling because it's not what you're used to seeing from where you're from.
Your first
um
Mobius or your first oh, I can't remember the name of the show now. They made a movie out of it that sucked totally. Um, Female assassin in the future. Um,
oh, Ghost in the
Eon
Shell.
Plex.
Oh, Aeon Flux too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, we started kind of with the seed of Genocyber, if you're familiar with that. Is like a you know famously violent anime. But we really did want this to feel like a manga that was attached to something from that era that you might have just missed out on. Maybe you never heard of it. Maybe you never came across it. So it does have a kind of end of the world tilt to it. When we were writing it, it felt like the world was ending. So the basic lay of the land is that humanity is under these giant geodesic domes because everyone is infected with a disease that reacts to UV from the sun. And if you spend too much time in the sun, your pores start to expand until your flesh leaves your body.
yeesh.
Yeah, so the governments of the world scrambled to kind of react to this, and a lot of this we were looking at the news day to day and thinking, trying to think ahead, doing basic speculative fiction stuff. um and we were trying to keep this a story that when we were done with it, because we knew it would probably take a long time to put together, it would feel relevant to people who had just lived through a global pandemic. um and I mean, our team is myself. I'm in America. I'm on the East Coast. We've got two illustrators on the West Coast. Our lead illustrators in Portugal, and our kind of logistics producer guy is in Brazil. So we've seen all different kinds of responses, all different kinds of things from our governments, and it all sort of trickled into while we were working on this doomsday
Yeah,
narrative.
you pull off your experiences. We've been on for, well, we're over 10 minutes now, but at less than 7 minutes, you already had a backer come in from the audience here, which
It's shake and bake, and I help.
Our shake and bake moment.
Thank you.
So thank you, BAP2 in the chat, for doing that. You're at 341, had a $5,000 goal, which I don't even have to ask. That really is what you do need to produce a comic.
Yeah. I had, like I said, we're pretty new to this. So when we did the initial campaign, and I talked a lot with Neff and Freak Girl about campaigns, and they gave me just pages and pages of advice. But with this being kind of like a, hey, here we are, we want to give people a chance to get in, kind of early on this. We just did some math on what it would be if we sold all the hardcover books. So even if we don't hit our goal, the people who grab the hardcover book, even if I have to eat some cost, it's no skin off my nose. I want you guys to have something special for jumping on early.
Well, is this the end of your full 60 days, or did you are you going to extend for another 30 after this?
To be honest, I wasn't even sure that I could do that. If it's something I could do, I'd have to talk to the team about it. But I know that the basic gist here is that if you back at the hardcover book level on this campaign, if we go to do an omnibus of the book, the art book, and some of the other things that we've produced in this universe, that hardcover you get for $30 on this campaign, it's one of a kind. I don't know how many people have backed it, but that's the right there. Eight is however, yeah, it's an 8 of 8 or 1 of 8. So those books will be produced by us. We have a printer lined up, and we'll I'll probably make 15 of them and give some to my family or whatever, but you'll have an incredibly rare early adopter copy of this book. And if it does get released again, I believe just the regular paperback version will be on Amazon, and we're thinking about putting out some kind of omnibus once we're complete on the project. And that'll include some extras, but the physical version in this campaign will never be produced again. So we really wanted that to be something we could do for the people who see this and go, okay, these guys are new, they've got a lot of ambition. Let's see let's see what happens here.
Yeah. Well, if you set this up as a 30-day campaign, then as soon as it's over, you have the option of saying, okay, I'm not done, let it keep going for another 30 days.
Gotcha.
And then you can, because you got people in the chat like Pops Van Zant, who has Comics Madness, the Comics Related Madness. I got to get the letters correct. So how am I just hearing about this with 31 hours left, and which means you haven't been on his show?
Well, I would love to answer that question, actually, because it's kind of like we weren't sure how this worked. We are coming from a standpoint of, I have a writing background. I have a background in poetry and screenwriting and goofy stuff. And I met with some illustrators and some people who had some ideas. And, these 5 people are mainly on the art side. None of us are on the business side. So it actually took us a long time to kind of find out, oh, you can just go on these shows. Like you can just, yeah. Like
we're hungry for guests.
Well, and I know it sounds stupid, but early on, I was sort of messaging people being like, hey, you have a YouTube show. We didn't really know where to go. And I've told this story before on a couple of other shows, but it's like when I first hit Twitter, I didn't have a personal Twitter account, and my assessment of the comic space was like, it's kind of iffy out there. I'm not sure who, not like if it wasn't a business type thing, I wouldn't feel this way. If it was just making art for art's sake, I would go to whoever. But it felt like everybody was sort of mad at other people, and we couldn't make heads or tails of it right away.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, it's
So I know I wasn't wrong. Everyone's told me this. Like I know my assessment was spot on. But so not that we were scared, but to be frank, like it was a little nerve-wracking to figure out where do you even go to promote your book at first. And now we know. So
You
here we
you go
are.
everywhere, and
Right.
the ones that tell you no, so they said no.
Yeah.
You go somewhere else. But yeah, it can get pretty hairy out there because it's like you're watching these groups like, oh, this is great. These guys are collaborating. They're getting along. They're making great comics. You go to bed. You wake up. Who killed who?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I'm coming from, I've made stuff and put it on the internet, but I don't try to generate clout and generate a following for myself. Like I'm 30, I have a 1-year-old son. I don't want people to know who I am necessarily. Even if I've done something really cool, like the way the internet is, people sort of parasocially attach on to any figure that they identify with. So I mainly keep to myself. And then when you do see how people get riled up over comics, it's almost just like I can't quite figure. I'm not gonna ask where it's coming from, but I do understand that like there are people who are very happy, they're very friendly, they're very willing to help, and you just
Most
sort of
people
have
are.
yeah, and
Most people are.
you sort of have to ask, hey, who are those people? And if you find one of them, they'll introduce you to the rest.
Yeah, people don't like to see their friends attacked. So and that's happening on two levels. You have it with the literal physical person where oh my god, they attacked creator X, whom I've collected forever. How dare you do that? No longer do I wish to associate with you. Or they change character X, which can be seen as an attack on someone that you've had an attachment to since childhood. It's a fictional friend.
Yeah.
It's like they did what to Superman? I can't believe that they would attack my friend that way. Um,
Yeah, I get
so
I see, I stay out of that, but I also understand it. Because I'm kind of like at the point where you know, there like I've read Joseph Campbell, I like Marshall McLuhan, I like
Hero with a Thousand
Baudrillard.
Faces, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like a media guy, so I understand that narrative is kind of at a point where we've heard a lot of stories the same way, and what people really do appreciate now are the like icons and the things they've come to consider sacred in specific stories. And like that's I mean that's why like we now I would say this story is unique because it's made up of so many different things that we love. You'll see pieces of The Thing, of Videodrome, of Genocyber, different, different manga, different anime, different comics, different movies, and that's just sort of the way it has to be now. But when it comes to like dismantling things, I totally understand the culture war that builds up around that. I just choose I choose to not involve myself necessarily, or at least as little as I can.
So this is a science fiction world. It's got a very heavy manga influence to it. Manga, whatever. It's
Yeah, whatever.
uh, and everyone has to live in dome cities now because of this virus that reacts to you know
Yeah,
ultraviolet light, and
yeah,
your
in the
skin will
sun.
fall off your body and you die. I always look at stuff like that. I'm like, okay, we know we need the dome cities, and I go back to stories like Atlantis sinking into the ocean. Oh my God, Atlantis is sinking. The only way we can survive is to put a dome over the city. I'm like, how long do you have to build a dome? That's
Yeah,
a massive
this
project.
is something we seriously spent um months and months on, is like the world building and the lore behind like making all this make sense. And I included it in the art book. I put together, concept art and a lore book, and it's like 30 some pages of lore, or 40 some pages of lore, and then another
Oh,
30,
nice.
40 of art and stuff. And that has a lot of the answers to how they did this in the story in the universe. But the biggest thing, like the key to this, is essentially that the geodesic domes in this world were grown. And they're grown because there's this substance that has essentially proliferated industry in the world, right? It's got a lot of uses. It's got a lot of properties that make it valuable. The spice melange of this world, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the truffula trees.
Right. And its presence among everything, you could compare it to plastics in our own world or something. That is discovered to be the cause of the disease. So in many cases in this world, they have to use the thing that's put them in this situation as a solution. So yeah, the process of building the domes is laid out in the lore book, and it takes a couple years, and a lot of people die. It's not handled well. You know, there are people who swear by umbrellas in the meantime. There are companies that try to push protective equipment. Some people make a lot of money, other people don't. But there is a if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into a story where when you're done with the story, you want to pick up a supplementary kind of book and poke around in the lore, we've tried to supply that for you where we can. Um, you know, it is science fiction, so we did try to play up that there's a passionate audience for that kind of thing, which we understand.
Now, wow, you talk about this being a body horror kind of book.
Yeah.
So we're definitely seeing something here where somebody's being ripped open. There's a somebody inside the somebody.
Yeah. We really, I think one of the first like things, like places we started from was The Thing. Obviously, just the still images of different special effects from The Thing because they're so impressive. Videodrome as well. There was a period early on where we are trying to get a character's gun arm correct, and we had stills of Videodrome laid over, me holding a Nerf gun with like tinfoil and putty wrapped around it, to get some kind of workable still that our artist Nelson could kind of craft something from. I think there's shots of it if you scroll down too. But yeah, there you go. We were working on just making this something unique in the sense of we're not afraid to manipulate the human body in grotesque ways because we have that freedom on the page. And this is something that goes back to that 80s and 90s anime spirit of being a little more willing to depict disgusting transformations, grotesque deaths, that and I mean it's the type of thing where it really is sort of soaked all over the flavor of the story. You'll get your body horror pretty much throughout because it's just if you start from a world where the sun melts your flesh off, you kind of have your gas pedal to the floor to begin with.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
Were you familiar with your team before you decided to kick off with this? I mean, were you guys buddies already?
Some of us. So I knew my producer Harlem who's in Brazil, and he and I used to make YouTube videos together with one of the illustrators, AP Moore. He goes by Cool Slaw. I think I saw him in your chat.
Yeah.
And the three of us were in a similar little creative group, and we were putting together documentaries, just hour-long cultural pieces about like video games and economics and religion and just whatever we wanted, it was very, believe me, it was very kind of weird and out there, and we weren't necessarily, like I said, not doing it for attention. But the three of us eventually got connected with uh Redux, who is another illustrator, who's done concept art. A lot of his art turned up in the art book. He also has a YouTube channel called Paper Starship, if you want to check that out.
You keep mentioning
badass
the art
channel.
book, and we have people in the chat asking about that, and I'm looking for
At any
where it
tier,
is.
at any tier, you get the art book for free.
Digitally.
Digitally. Yeah. So, and actually what'll probably end up happening is as soon as I get off of this show, I'll email out to all the new backers the art book, because the art book is already out to all the previous backers. I sent you a couple copies as well.
Yes, you did. I just didn't know you held up print versions earlier.
Yeah,
the
print versions. So after the campaign, I think February 22nd, it'll be on Kindle. There will be a paperback copy on Amazon, and there will be a hardcover copy on Amazon, which I got the proof of today.
Okay.
And it's Amazon. They're serviceable. I don't know if anybody's ever gotten any print direct stuff from there before, but the art book itself, I think, like if you end up falling in love with this world and when the book comes out, you're totally on board with it and you pick up an omnibus version, that will probably be the highest quality version of the art book we print. Otherwise, it's just going to live on Amazon until we release the book itself. And
Right.
if you're looking to get, you know, if you're hungry now, that contains almost all the concept art I was able to save through the pandemic, presented as I received it from my artist in Portugal. Um, and just, pages and pages of lore, interviews from everybody on the team, um, all kinds of stuff. There's tons of goodies in there.
See, that's one of the other things that this indie comics revolution that has sprung up through not just because we've always had indie comics, but they've still been like smaller publishers, guys who were local to each other, working out of a garage, Eastman and Laird kind of deal. But now we're getting to meet all these cool artists who had all this talent, but couldn't get into the established comic system, not because they were gate kept in any particular way, but because it's like the seats are all full. We're not. We have everybody we need. And when we need somebody else, we go to somebody we know.
That that is entirely my experience. Like in the 2 shows I've been on, I've talked about how at this point there's at least 1, maybe 2 generations of artists and creators who sort of just don't they don't know where to be. And they're making things, but there's not the infrastructure around them to put them in front of an audience that they can connect with. And so, I think you're gonna continue to find where there are these um, kind of thriving industries that protect themselves, um, that are willing to like walk people through how to do certain things. More and more people that have maybe been working for 10 or 20 years at this point on something are going to kind of bubble to the surface.
Yeah,
Because like
I'm
just
seeing
as
more and more coming from Brazil, from Portugal, from the Philippines,
well,
and they're fantastic artists.
that's what I was gonna say is Nelson Pereira. Find him on Twitter. I think his handle is Nelson Pereira. He tweets out tons of stuff that he's working on with Neonseed, and he's 10 years older than I am, and it's shocking to me that he is not a professional illustrator, in any capacity.
I keep
Um,
trying to say Neon Genesis Evangelion whenever I.
Yeah, well, we kind of, we may have been trying to get you to think that.
Okay, I thought so because I'm looking at
You
the
know,
art style.
yeah, and I mean that is part of like this continuously being like we're admitting it's an homage. We're admitting we're cribbing notes from people. We're not shy about that. Um, I think we went through 3 or 4 names. I think the original name was Violet Violence or something like that. There might even be sketches that have, Violet Violence somewhere, in the footnote or something. But um, yeah, we want people to kind of know to some extent that like we are aware as non Japanese people trying to make something in a manga style. We're standing on a lot of shoulders of giants here, and we want you to see that in this and go find them and go look at their work as well. And I think that's especially true of like Nelson from the visual component. He has influences that I don't understand because I don't draw. I don't do, I can't, I could not even attempt to do what he does.
Yeah,
So
I just left this one up here because this is just so freaking beautiful.
yeah, well, and a lot of this is just concept work. I think that original drawing was just a highlighter and a ballpoint pen. So through this process, like he just got paper and everything. Like we've been shoestringing it through a lot of the pre-pro and the concept stuff because that's what you do here. You have time, you don't have money.
Yeah.
So you make it however you can.
How big is this book? I mean, when it's finally done. Well, first of all, how big is the book, and is it the only book, or is this going to be an ongoing of some sort?
So it's an entirely contained story.
Cool.
The script is finished, and this it's a beefy script. So on the campaign it says 100 plus pages. It's probably gonna break 200, 250.
Wow.
And I mean that's part of the space of trying to do something in a manga style. Like a typical volume of manga might easily hit 200 pages. I think the first volume of the Evangelion manga collected is 500 pages. Um, but there's also certain things I think where the way the story is told on the page, you know, it it's a little bit more because of how manga is. Manga is a lot more, and I could be wrong. I really only understand manga. I don't have a full understanding of American comics, admittedly. But there's a lot more visual things that are, almost wordless in the storytelling. So the length of it is probably more just in tune of how much Nelson wants to put into the rendering. The composition, the cutting, the cinematic quality of it, I think is, he's sort of the director now. He's got the script, he's got his producer, he's got people to sort of support him. But it'll come down to his selection. But I would say probably around 250, 300 pages.
Wow. So folks are getting a brick of a book for this
Yeah,
$30, $40
yeah, and I mean, if you can include everything else, with the art book, you're getting another 100 pages. Um, we're thinking possibly about putting the script out somehow, the original script,
Yeah.
because I haven't talked to you about it, but when we first wrote the script, we wrote it in screenplay format, which is a little insane, but that's where we started because that was the easiest way to get everything, on the page. And the process of in betweening that is sort of blocking out to thumbnail and looking at what you have, insert descriptions of things and breaking it down. But we've been thinking about trying to put out that original script as well. So all told, there's a door stopper here worth of material.
Yeah, this Nelson's in the chat says he does estimate 250 to 300 pages.
Okay, cool. So I'm not far off. Awesome. I'm glad I'm not.
So,
I'm glad we're on the same page then.
So are we talking manga dimensions in like length and width as well as thickness, or are you talking standard comic book size as far as the?
It's around 7 by 10.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So like 6 3/4 by 10 1/4 is the usual comic book size.
I think that's about what because for the hardcover book that you'll get off this campaign, I think it's 6.69 by 10.25 or something like that.
Yep. That's right at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you going to do it? It's manga influence, but is it going to be manga layout, as in go to the back of the book and work your way forward?
It's tough because we want to do a Japanese version and other translated versions down the road. So if Nelson's here, he could answer that better than I could, how he's gonna ultimately determine to lay that out. I I personally think that American comic style is is probably the way it's gonna be put out initially. But it's very possible that if you wanted to get a flipped version in the future, it will exist because we are going to do a we really want to do a Japanese version and get it get it over there and get it in a different marketplace and just see what happens. So if we flip it for that, I'll make an English copy if there's people who are hungry for it.
I was going to say it's you can't always do both, because if you do an American style comic and then you say, well, let's print it manga version so it reads backwards. You sometimes you have page 2 and 3 are like this big splash, and it's like, okay, that doesn't read the same way.
True. So I think if Nelson's here, he'd have the fastest response for which way he wants to lay it out. But that's sort of out of my field as the writer.
Also, Western printers have they're not used to doing manga books because they're just
that makes a ton of sense.
You'll get things like it'll be printed backwards, like the last page will be page 1, but then you turn the page and then 2 and 3 read American style left to right, and then page 4 and 5 is like I'm going backwards, but I'm twisting my. It's happened.
And see if there were a heavy manga reading audience that was really hungry for us to flip it. Yeah, okay, there you go. I'm doing it traditionally left to right. So there you go. Thank you, Nelson. Um, but yeah, if there were people who were really hungry for it, like just the way I am, I'd be like, we gotta get it. We gotta do it for him.
Yeah.
Um, but no,
I would stick left to
I
right
wouldn't
because
step on Nelson because that's his territory.
I would stick that way because in all the shipping that I've done, I have never shipped a comic to Japan.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing that the Japanese culture is huge in the online, independently produced American
yeah,
Western stuff,
yeah.
and I haven't seen them produce any either. I haven't seen
Well,
anything online that's.
and
I've seen one guy living in Japan, and he's British.
that's why I'm so interested just to poke my head in there into that room and go, is anything going on in here? Because I feel like there would be crossover just for the stories. Like just the way the stories unfold and the character types and just the, you know, um but I'm out of my depth on the business field. I have nothing to back up my intuition there.
But it'll be an exploration and a discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I like so far it's been very positive to try to figure out how to just get it anywhere sold.
Well,
um yeah.
we're working on it. We're doing our best here. Um, Tell us about the characters because
Sure, yeah.
we've seen them, but we haven't really learned who they are and why they are.
So the man on the cover and in all the ads with the big gun there, Gene Almeida, he is kind of our protagonist we enter with, and we wanted to create a character that would remind people of Deckard from Blade Runner, would remind people of Snatcher, the Kojima video game. We wanted like a detective look to them. Um, and so the story itself is set in, what used to be the state of Brazil, same geographic area. And this man works as a negotiator. And before we came on, we were talking about securing data and stuff, and that's basically what he
Yeah,
does. His entire job is that if people have information that they would like to keep off chain, as in not in any way online, not in any way observed by this system that runs the domes, they call a person like him, and he uses proprietary equipment to secure that information on himself on a personal area network. He's kind of like a Johnny Mnemonic walking hard drive for.
yeah. We used to call that sneaker net
Yeah. Yeah.
when you walked it from one machine to the other.
Right. Yes. So SneakerNet is something that you need in this world because it can be used for um totally legal purposes. Maybe two businesses have a contract they don't want public, so they sequester it for a given period of time, and a negotiator holds it and within 6 months releases the details of the contract to the network. So there's totally legitimate reasons to be a negotiator, but a lot of negotiators get into what's called gray dealing, where maybe a criminal organization needs your services, and maybe you're holding data that if you got caught with it, you'd be in big trouble. So people who become negotiators are usually, washed out from a more rigid governmental profession, or perhaps don't want to live between the lines of the system that governs these domes and keeps everybody's, lives moving back and forth each day. So we enter this story with a man who uh in a lot of stories, he lives on the edge. He literally lives on one of these outer domes. He lives by himself. He has a job that can be very private. He keeps to himself. Until, like in most good detective stories, he's approached by a beautiful young woman who you see at the top of the screen. And that is Miss Holly Lejeune, and it's like I'm sure you're sitting there thinking Chinatown. I'm sure you're sitting there thinking every noir ever, and that's kind of what we wanted, right? So we really you know had to create some characters that could introduce you to the world that would feel familiar, that we ultimately start to differentiate out as the world gets more disturbing and wider. Um, and without giving away what I can't give away, the first two acts follow uh, that gentleman and this young woman through a negotiation. She needs something from a criminal organization. He has the means to get her there, and for the first two acts, we see that through, and then in typical manga, anime fashion, the third act sort of ramps up beyond the stars and becomes about the end of the world. Yeah.
That escalated quickly, as the
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
goes.
And I mean, to be fair, the world is kind of already at its end once most of humanity lives under domes and, everybody's on the blockchain, so to speak. But we really, we tried to craft something that I think for people who enjoys like I said, something that feels familiar but is ultimately gonna sort of bloom out into something unique and it's stand on its own. Um you will feel comfortable, I think, in the first act of this story, and then you will come along for the ride in the second two.
So this is the whole thing about the pandemic that they're facing. That's just background. This is really a crime noir thriller
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
kind of a setting.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean it plays into it because by the end you will understand more about that pandemic and its origins and its implications. We try to leave no stone unturned. Um and like, you know, I've I've tried my best to avoid spoiling the ending, but some of this lore goes back very far in human history. Some of these things go back. There's characters from ancient history that appear in this story. There's certain things that are, if you were to look them up, one of my favorite, for example, is like, is there a magnetic anomaly over southern Brazil? Yes, there is. Um, we integrated that kind of stuff into the story because we wanted it to feel fantastic, but we also wanted it to feel like, uh, you know, it applied to your real life. And it in many ways it did for us because it got us through being locked in our houses. It got us through, panic on the news screens and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's I think that I like to think there's something for everybody in there. But overall it might be very different from what you would typically pick up, all things considered.
Now, the other main character that we're seeing, because that character, I almost
Hmm.
said she, but I can't say she or he. I don't know. That we're seeing in the artwork, opposite the detective, is this character over here
Yeah.
nonchalantly playing with an eyeball.
Right, yeah, you can say she. That's Rabia, and I can tell you a little bit about her because she is kind of like a character we showcase to give you some of an indication of what I mean by how weird this gets. But yeah, she's noticeably not necessarily human. Um, and she is nonchalantly playing with an eyeball. And there is an element to this that explores. I guess the easiest way I can put this is that humanity is now under these domes, and effectively they have trapped themselves. Like perfect prey, they have trapped themselves, and without giving away necessarily what the apex predator in this story is. You know it, it's the type of situation where humanity is not necessarily alone with their problems. There are elements that surround them that come to reveal themselves that are perhaps worse than they could imagine.
Ah,
So yeah, so
we're being
they're
attacked slowly.
yeah, yeah. So there's I think that people will have a lot of fun with this. If you're a fan of something where you get kind of a complete eschatology of a fictional world, um, this really is for you. Especially if you find yourself like I really think this could be the type of thing where if you don't know how to transition from like anime to manga or from like movies to comics, because this has such a root in trying to be cinematic, trying to capture the sort of movement and dynamic nature of anime. um, there will be people who feel comfortable with this, especially if you're coming from like, oh, I just watched Ava, or I just, I just saw Aeon Flux, and you know, I'm hungry for something else.
Yeah, yeah. I just started watching anime seriously recently myself. Off and on, I have not like dived into a total weebdom, and
Right.
it's not like I've never been exposed to things like Speed Racer and Battle of the Planets. When I got into college in the '80s, Fist of North Star,
Yeah.
and Vampire Hunter D and stuff like that. The giants, as Spock would say, and well, they kind of were giants at the time. I just remember Fist of North Star. I'm watching a cartoon and he puts his first of all he slices across some guy and then his body just kind of does a
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's different. And then he reaches in and pulls this guy's heart out. I'm like, okay, this is not your typical what we were calling then Japanimation
Right.
cartoons.
Well, and the game, the palette is changing. There was a very warm response to Invincible being animated, and being very violent.
Yeah,
And I'm not necessarily like, oh yay, let's now render a bunch of violence. But I think that if you have an artist that has a particular gear for it and talent for it, and they're telling an appropriate story where you know you can yeah, you can really turn that knob up on just how gruesome things can be.
well,
And if yeah.
historically in comics, that's exactly what's going to happen. I don't know if it'll be in animation the same way, but when in the '80s and DC put out The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller,
Right.
and Watchmen, and The Killing Joke from Alan Moore. Well, as soon as we saw that Robin died young in The Dark Knight Returns, it immediately demanded that Robin die soon in the concurrent universe, and of course he did, but he got better. Um, but yeah, but even more than that, DC Comics said, "Hey, this over-the-top violent, this grim, this dark, this dystopic vision of things, people like it. Let's do more of that." Discounting the whole fact that what it was, hey, these were really well-written, well-crafted stories by writers
Right.
who knew what they were doing. Let's do more of that.
Well, and I think part of it is like there's an area of freedom you enter into when killing a character means that it's going to feel um like a real depiction of them dying in that situation. Like if I write in a story that a character gets taken out a certain way, I think that it definitely does change the way I'll handle that as a writer, because I'm thinking to myself, well, we're going to actually show it. We're not going to movie it up, but we're not going to use corn
Yeah,
syrup. Um, and you can do that in comics. You can't do that in a Marvel movie or anything, yet, I guess. Um, but yeah, you're right that there's a very rich history, not just in DC and Marvel, but even like the horror comics and like the pulp comics of trying to take things to that line because it's drawn. And like we definitely do want to do that. Like I think having started from Genocyber, where you do have violence against children. You do have like people pulling their heads apart, and you fly through their body while they pull their head apart as the camera. Like um it's stuff where I think like there is going to be a growing hunger for not the gritty, grim dark realism, but a kind of like actual uh you know good storytelling, realism, like an authentic, honest storytelling that has
Nelson's
maybe
still
been
waiting for his.
absent.
Yeah, Nelson's still waiting for his Dark Knight Returns movie. They did do a two-part animated movie. If that fills the bill for that, it wasn't quite the same thing. They also did an animated movie of The Killing Joke, which was absolutely not the same thing.
No, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that was not the same at all.
no,
That one I
no,
caught.
it was like it was like the second half of the movie started to become The Killing Joke, but the first half was Batgirl and Batman hooking up, and that was like that really had people thrown back. They're like, what? Why? How? Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Simplejack, welcome. Glad to see you here again, man. Miss building Legos with you. You've moved on to video games, haven't you? I don't do that. We used to build Lego on the stream every Sunday with an overhead camera and just buy
Oh,
different kits and
nice.
put them together. It's
That's
a
awesome.
nice way to just chill.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up at the top of the hour. Is there anything about this that I mean, look, folks, it's some beautiful artwork in a manga style. It's going to be 250 to 300 pages for the $30 you get. You've got a December 2022 release date on this. How much of the artwork would you say you have done now? How many pages are in a completed status?
Not many, but we are on to final artwork. Like I said, the script's done. The everything is in Nelson's hands now.
Okay,
So
Nelson, we're
for
looking at you, man.
Yeah, so for a year, he'll be basically the good news is if you back for a year, we're gonna be just transparent as possible. You'll see everything Nelson's working on his feeds and on mine. And then on top of that, I believe we're giving out the entire like first chapter, so probably 20 or 30 pages for free to everyone.
Okay, keep those
Yeah,
updates coming on the Indiegogo. That's really
yeah.
important to backers.
Well, and everything will go to backers first. So, like, for example, when we do get those, when we get to that first chapter mark, backers will receive it first in a DRM free PDF. It is yours to keep, share. That is we're not putting any restrictions on that just because you guys are here early. And then a couple of weeks after that, a month after that or so, we will push out that first chapter to everybody for free. And the updates will kind of keep coming. We'll probably give backers just pages in certain places from that point on, so you
Yeah,
can see.
teasers.
Yeah, just teasers. And be there will be we're already sort of working it out, but Nelson's working on these nice board pages, and because there's so few backers at the physical level, we're probably going to include some things like original boards, just extras that are not listed here because you're such a small cohort, like such an elite cohort of people who have backed this so early. So we'll be looking out for everybody that hops on board. And if you don't hop on board now, it's totally okay. You can watch the development, and then when the omnibus rolls around or it rolls onto Amazon, you can pick it up there.
We've seen a lot of concept art, which is all black and white. Is the book itself black and white, or are you doing colors on this?
The book will be black and white. I
Okay.
think depending on how printing is, we're kind of trying to work that out. That's another one of those things that's up to Nelson. If he ends up coloring pages for shading anyway, with kind of even just like the watercolor kind of wash look to him, and it's something that we can do and people are for it, we'll, if there's 8, 10 people that are getting a book, we'll kind of poll and ask, but for now it's black and white.
Okay.
By default, black and white.
Yeah, because we had a couple of color images,
Yeah,
obviously here.
yeah. Because we do a lot with the color for promo. We do a lot with the color because it's Nelson's style. He'll do some light coloring on things, and then down the road for sure we'll have a color version. Our other artist, AP Moore, we'll put together in the far future. This book will release in color at some point, but for now, black and white.
Yeah, the artwork is it's an interesting blend because if I look at this image right here, I'm getting, yes, I see the Japanese manga influence, and yet I also see a very European sort of a Mobius kind of influence on it. So it's a weird, beautiful blend of things coming together here.
Yeah, Nelson's insanely talented. Like if I I know he's got 10 years on me. I hope I'm as good of a writer as he is an illustrator in 10 years, but I envy that guy a lot.
All right. Well, Max, thank you so much for coming on tonight and bringing Neonseed Babylon. See, I almost said the Bangalian thing again. I've got to look and read Neonseed Babylon onto the show. Best of luck with it. I saw your team in the chat voting to extend if it was an option. So you have the blessing of at least 2 of them to go on for the next 30 days, which will give you time to get on more shows and get some more backers. And I definitely recommend you reach out to Pops Van Zant after that. And And do just that. I'll help you make some connections if you'd like on Twitter. I can DM you to people who will definitely be interested in having you on.
Thank you.
Folks in the chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show if you're not here to watch it. So we're just glad to have you here. If you like the content, consider subscribing, maybe even become a member of the channel. It's the minimal tier that YouTube would let me put in. And all members will get a little envelope of Critical Blast swag, sticker, keychain, that kind of thing. Just as, yeah, we're paying you to advertise for us. I know it's exactly what it is. But, people like that kind of stuff. And as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night.